CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: at least 20 dead and scores injured after an explosion at this fuel depot in Nagorno-Karabakh as thousands try to flee the breakaway region. Our other headlines: Ukraine's grain ports under fire for a second night as Russian drones strike the Danube River. China, Japan and South Korea agree to hold their first summit since 2019 after a meeting between the country's senior diplomats in Seoul. And jail for the captain of the boat involved in the 2019 collision which killed 27 passengers on the River Danube. At least 20 people have been killed in an explosion at a fuel depot in Nagorno-Karabakh, according to Armenian authorities. Around 300 people were injured in the blast, which happened as ethnic Armenians tried to flee the breakaway region, queued to refuel their vehicles. More than 19,000 people have now left the enclave after it was seized in a military operation by Azerbaijan last week. Thousands more are gathering at border checkpoints, waiting to cross into Armenia.
My husband died in the First Karabakh War. He was 30 and I was 26. Our children then were 3 and 4 years old. This is the 4th war that I've been through. My husband died back then and was just 30 in 1994. This is the cursed life that we've had to lead.
We made it safely here, but the column is very large. Lots of cars driving. The road was tough.
Can one live with the Azerbaijanis? No, you cannot. I've just arrived. I've been on the road for a day. My children are hungry.
Our correspondent Yolo Abdavith is following the story. It's heartbreaking stuff, isn't it? More refugees leaving Nagorno-Karabakh, and there are still casualties.
Yes, there are. You mentioned the attack on that, which we're still not sure who was behind it and how many people were hospitalized and how many people were killed. But those kind of comments from people who are trying to escape will be very familiar, I think, to audiences around the world. They've seen it in Syria, they've seen it in Ukraine. Further back, we've seen it in Bosnia and Kosovo as well in Europe. And it's an old enemy, an old enmity between Azerbaijan and Armenia, even though this breakaway region is recognized internationally as being a part of Azerbaijan. It has an ethnic Armenian majority. Now, since 2020, the Azeris are on the ascendancy and they've controlled more, which is why we're seeing now more people fleeing. Because, according to the Armenians, including the Armenian government, that the peacekeepers by the Russians are not doing their job in terms of this one road, the Lakan corridor is called, that connects Armenia to this breakaway region. There isn't enough food, there isn't enough aid going in. That's causing a lot of concern internationally. And also possibly the Azeris are slowly strengthening their hold. A one-day military operation last week, and suddenly we're having a stampede, or an exodus, as the Armenians are calling it.
As you say, decades of fighting between Azeris and Armenians around the disputed territories. Do you think we're now seeing the last stages of this conflict?
It dates back to 1988 and then the 1991 and the dissolution of the Soviet Republic. And since the end of the USSR, of course, we've seen all these different nationalities in this hotbed of ethnic communities in the Caucasus Mountains, that suddenly there have been lots of conflict in that region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And it seems that the Azeris now, with a bigger population, a bigger armed forces, bigger defense budget, money from oil and gas, which is strengthening their economy, it's now paying dividends to how they want to reclaim and retake what they think has been taken off them in terms of the Armenian controlling it. And it marks a difficult time for Russians because they do have 2,000 peacekeepers there, but obviously they're distracted further west with what's happening in Ukraine. The United States and Iran and Turkey are big players in that region as well. It'd be very interesting to see in the coming days what they say and where their loyalties may lie. And then it'll be difficult for the Armenians because the economy in Armenia is not that strong. There are already protests against the Prime Minister in Armenia. And if indeed tens of thousands of people will leave Nagorno-Karabakh, and so far it's around 20,000, but there are reportedly 120,000 Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. You can imagine the pressure of that if most of them, or even half of them, flee to Armenia.
Yolo, thank you. Our correspondent, Yolo Abdavith. Russia's defense ministry has released a video of its Black Sea Fleet commander a day after Ukrainian forces said they'd killed him. Viktor Solokov, Moscow's admiral in Crimea, is shown to be taking part in a video conference with Russia's defense minister. On Monday, Kyiv's military said Solokov was killed along with 33 other officers in a missile attack on the port of Sevastopol. The Kremlin has declined to comment. Ukraine's ports have again come under attack from Russian missiles. The governor of the Odessa region says 2 people were injured and infrastructure damaged in a strike on the Danube River port of Izmail. It's the second night in a row that Moscow has targeted Ukraine's grain ports. 2 people were killed in an attack on Monday that also destroyed a grain warehouse and hotel in Odessa. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Megumi Lim in Kyiv. Megumi, Kyiv says it's still managing to shoot down most Russian drones before they hit their targets, but some are clearly getting through.
That's right. Well, Jamie, the best air defense systems are concentrated in Kyiv, which is the capital, especially in central Kyiv, where the seat of government is. And of course, air defense systems are often located near key infrastructure facilities like nuclear power plants, and also they're located near the front lines, which is why Ukrainian officials have been urgently calling for an upgrade in air defense systems, especially in the Odessa region, because Russia has been intensifying its attacks in Odessa. Last night's attack was, as you said, the second night in a row Russia has attacked Odessa. And we have seen them destroy grain silos and port infrastructure. Its aim has been to try to cripple Ukraine's ability to export its food products. Now, another reason why air defense systems have not been able to shoot down every single missile and drone is because Russia has been using a tactic where they've changed the trajectory of its missiles and drones as they fly towards Ukraine. For example, the attack on Odessa 2 nights ago had drones flying from the east towards central Ukraine before changing its course to fly down south towards Odessa. Now, it also doesn't help that Russia has been targeting regions all across Ukraine at the same time. Last night, other regions like Kryvyi Rih and Kherson were attacked as well. Emergency services in Kherson said that within a 24-hour period, they have had to deal with 22 separate fires, which broke out as a result of Russian shelling. But the United States last week did pledge to supply Ukraine with more air defense systems. So we may be seeing a higher success rate in the shooting down of Russian missiles and drones in the coming months.
Megumi, thank you for that. Our correspondent Megumi Lim in Kyiv. Hundreds of Canadian Sikhs have staged protests outside India's diplomatic missions in Toronto, Vancouver and Ottawa. This comes a week after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian government agents of being linked to the murder of a Sikh leader on Canadian soil. India has denied those charges, calling them absurd and politically motivated. 8 officials have been detained in Libya after thousands of people were killed when 2 dams collapsed after a storm. The Attorney General's office said the Mayor of Derna and other officials were being held on suspicion of negligence. Residents have blamed the authorities for the disaster, with protesters setting fire to the mayor's home last week. President Biden is set to join members of the United Auto Workers Union on the picket line in Michigan in a rare display of presidential support for striking workers. The move comes a day before Biden's predecessor and likely 2024 presidential rival Donald Trump visits the state in a bid to win over voters. South Korea has staged its first large-scale military parade in a decade as it celebrated the 75th anniversary of the creation of its armed forces. Crowds lined the streets of the capital, Seoul, to watch the display, ranging from ballistic missiles to tanks and underwater drones. President Yoon Suk-yeol warned the DPRK against the use of nuclear weapons and pledged to increase support for the country's defences. China, South Korea and Japan have agreed to resume their long-stalled trilateral summit at the earliest convenient time. The announcement comes after a meeting between the three countries in Seoul. Our correspondent Jack Barton reports.
The announcement that a high-level summit between South Korea, China and Japan will be convened as soon as possible was announced after a trilateral meeting in Seoul between senior foreign ministry officials from the three countries. South Korea's foreign ministry said the three had also agreed to try convene a trilateral foreign ministers meeting in November to prepare for the summit. The South Korean government reportedly proposed 6 key areas to deepen cooperation, including people-to-people exchanges, science and digital technology, sustainable development and climate change. Trilateral summits were first held in 2008, but were suspended in 2019 following a dispute between Seoul and Tokyo over compensation for forced labour victims during Japan's colonial-era occupation of the peninsula. Efforts to revive the three-way talks gained pace after a rapid improvement in ties with Japan under the current South Korean administration of President Yoon Suk-yeol. South Korea is reportedly pushing for the high-level summit to be held within the next 12 months and hopes it might include Chinese President Xi Jinping. Much has changed since the last talks, from global geopolitics to economics, and many analysts say even if a leaders' summit can't be achieved in that time frame, just the fact that working-level trilateral talks are back on is in itself a positive development. Jack Barton, CGTN, Seoul.
The key to improved China-UK relations lies in mutual respect. That's according to the Chinese Chargé d'Affaires in London. His remarks were made at a London reception to celebrate the 74th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. More than 500 people, including business representatives and international students, attended.
China is not a challenge to the UK, let alone a threat. China's development aims to bring the Chinese people a better life. It is not targeted against anyone, nor does it threaten anyone. Instead, it will only bring opportunities for common development to all countries. Due to different history, national conditions and systems, it is normal for China and the UK to have different views on some issues. The key is to respect each other, address differences in a constructive manner, and not interfere in each other's internal affairs. I would like to emphasize that issues related to Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, or Tibet are China's internal affairs and allow no interference.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the art of a good clean, how one of Italy's most famous sculptures is kept looking his best.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. At least 20 dead and scores of people injured after an explosion at a fuel depot in Nagorno-Karabakh as thousands try to flee the breakaway region. Our other headlines: Ukraine's grain ports come under fire for a second night as Russian drones strike the Danube River. The captain of a riverboat that collided with another vessel in Budapest in 2019 has been sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. The incident on the River Danube killed 25 South Korean tourists and 2 crew members. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez is in Budapest. Pablo, you've been in court. What happened? How did the ship's captain react to this verdict?
Well, it was indeed an emotional day at the Budapest High Court today. Yuri Chaplinsky was convicted of failure of negligence, rather, for endangering waterway safety over his role back in 2019 when his vessel collided with a smaller vessel. It all happened right here on the banks of the Danube underneath the Margaret Bridge. As you said in your introduction, 25 South Korean tourists died and 2 crew members also perished in that accident. One of those bodies has not been recovered yet. Now, during the proceedings today, Chaplinsky expressed deep remorse. He said that not a day goes by when he does not remember the events of that day. Now, according to Hungarian law, that charge carries a typical sentencing of 2 to 8, and the average is usually about 5 years. But the judge said there's a number of extenuating circumstances, such as the deteriorating health that Chaplinsky is in right now, and the fact that he doesn't have a criminal record. She also mentioned that he has been in custody since 2019, and that was basically the reasoning for the sentencing today.
And he faced another charge, didn't he?
Yeah, that was a charge for failure to render aid. He faced 35 counts, 1 for each passenger on board of those vessels. Now, the judge said that there was no intentionality, that the prosecutor failed to prove that. He said that, she said that this accident rather was the result of his negligence and his carelessness. Now, the prosecution has already challenged that reasoning, and they are appealing. They want the maximum of 8 years, and Chaplinsky's lawyer after court said that they don't believe that he should have been found guilty at all, and they are also challenging the verdict.
Pablo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez in Budapest. A prominent human rights lawyer has been sentenced to 4 years in prison by a court in Thailand under the country's strict royal defamation law. Arnon Nampo was convicted over a speech he made during a student-led protest in 2020 in which he called for a national conversation on the monarchy. Lawyers for Arnon, who faces 13 more charges, says he will appeal against the ruling. Thai law allows for lengthy sentences to anyone insulting the royal family. Spain's right-wing opposition leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo has launched his bid to form a government following July's election, where no party won an overall majority. His Conservative People's Party won the most seats, but has so far failed to get enough votes for a parliamentary majority. The vote will take place on Wednesday. If Feijóo fails, as expected, acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez will have 2 months to make his bid before new elections are called. Heavy rain has caused a river to burst its banks in the Guatemalan capital, leaving at least 6 people dead and 12 others missing. Floods swept away 6 homes and the families who lived in them in the early hours of Monday. Flooding is a constant threat during Guatemala's rainy season, which extends to November. Sea ice around Antarctica hit a record low surface area this year. That's according to United States authorities. The National Snow and Ice Data Center said the shift could have dire consequences for wildlife like penguins, while it could also speed up global warming by reducing the amount of sunlight reflected back into space. Antarctic sea ice peaked in September when it covered just under 17 million square kilometres, the lowest winter maximum since the records began in 1979. Michelangelo's David is considered by many to be one of the most beautiful sculptures ever made. But to conserve its beauty, Italy's 519-year-old statue needs specialist cleaning every few months. To celebrate the 150th anniversary of the statue's relocation to Florence, the Museum Accademia Gallery invited people to see David's cleaning regime. Our correspondent Alex Fraser went along.
More than just art, it's a symbol of Italy, depicting the biblical character David preparing to take down the giant Goliath. Every 2 months, the gallery undertakes the detailed and precise process of cleaning Michelangelo's masterpiece. Restoration expert Eleonora Pucci uses a vacuum, thin brushes and delicate fabrics to remove the dirt and dust. Climbing to the top of mobile scaffolding to clean David's famous marble face.
Whenever you're near a work of art, it's always extremely delicate, because every operation that you do, any instruments that you use, could be very useful, but at the same time could also cause some damage.
Without the work, the marble would lose shine and go grey. The regular clean also ensures that the statue doesn't need a potentially damaging full restoration.
150 years ago, the famous statue was moved from outside the Palazzo Vecchio to the Accademia Gallery in order to protect it.
David was crafted between 1501 and 1504, during Italy's Renaissance period, when Michelangelo used a single block of marble. Since, the statue has picked up a few knocks. Rioters broke off its arm during the 16th century. It lost a finger in 1813. And in 1843, the statue was cleaned with hydrochloric acid, a move that is now considered as being disastrous for its conservation.
Now we know that acid is not good for marble, so now we are working with very, very sensitive brushes, with very delicate instruments. We are not touching the marble.
The sculpture's left foot was attacked by a man with a hammer in 1991. More recently, damage to the statue hasn't been physical. The museum has sued a number of companies for the use of its image commercially, calling it detrimental to cultural heritage. An Italian court found that the image of the sculpture was protected from commercial use by Italy's constitution.
And this is really a big victory, and we are glad about this, because that means that there is a chance to save the dignity of this masterpiece.
After the cleaning has finished, the statue, which stands at just over 5 meters, will continue to receive more than 1.5 million visitors per year. It may be over 519 years old, but this process should ensure the statue will be preserved for many more to come. Alex Fraser, CGTN, Florence.
In a landmark for gaming, China has won the Asian Games' first ever gold in esports, beating Malaysia 2-0 in the smartphone game Arena of Valor. Esports has marked its historic debut at the Hangzhou Asian Games, as our correspondent Zhao Yunfei now explains.
Good one to pass, and there's a penalty.
Passion and excitement run high in the world of esports. These emotions are expertly conveyed to global audiences thanks to English commentators like Ayman. This is the first time the Asian Games included esports as medal events. Featuring 7 distinct games, this diversity showcases the strength of various countries in different categories.
There are different powerhouses in each games. Like for FC Online, it's always Thailand and Korea. In Arena of Valor, it's always China, or maybe even Malaysia. Esports is not conquered by just one country. When you have different games, different countries can prosper from it.
The esports venue can fit more than 4,000 people. During the competitions, the commentator's job is to bring the atmosphere to the audience in front of the screens.
The commentator team says professionalism is key to breaking stereotypes surrounding esports. One of their goals is leaving a lasting impression, especially on those who are tuning in to esports for the first time.
I believe that it is also the responsibility of the commentators to ensure that the game is being presented in a professional manner, so people understand that it is not just about mashing buttons for controllers. It requires coordination, it requires proper strategy to execute this, to translate that into a win in the professional standard of esports.
The team says they have witnessed how the industry has grown throughout the years, and its inclusion in the Asian Games brings esports to a whole new level.
I've been in esports since 2014, 2015, where esports is not even a thing yet. So to see it grow now that it has been put into huge games like Asian Games such as this, and then getting recognized all over the world, I think it's a huge honor and a huge opportunity to showcase that esports is not just playing video games.
It has also evolved into an industry with increased investments and participants, creating a new arena to celebrate the spirit of sports. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Hangzhou.
The headlines again: at least 20 dead and scores of other people injured after an explosion at a fuel depot in Nagorno-Karabakh as thousands try to flee the breakaway region. Our other headlines: Ukraine's grain ports under fire for a second night as Russian drones strike the Danube River. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to weather forecast. Over to Europe. A ridge of high is now dominant across much of Iberian Peninsula, stretching all the way to eastern portion. So you're going to have partly sunny sky or clearing conditions on Wednesday and also Thursday. On the contrary, the rainfall will be mostly seen in northern portion and also the southern portion, especially in southern Balkans. You may have a chance of heavy rain or torrential over the next 2 days. Talking about the maximum temperature, you can see day highs in much of central and eastern portion will be 20s, and back to Iberian Peninsula where you may see 30 degrees back again. Well, zooming to city forecast, we may have around 20 for daily highs in London, Paris on Thursday with a chance of light rainfall, like 10 degrees warmer for folks in Madrid and Lisbon, clear sky. Over to Central Europe, see 21 to 15 in Brussels, partly sunny sky turning to light rainfall. Daily highs in Berlin and Vienna would be very close to 30-degree mark, clearing conditions. Over to Warsaw, 26 to 11. Eventually up to Northern Europe, we may have around 20 for daily highs in Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Helsinki on Thursday. Minsk, Moscow, you may have 9 for the minimum temperatures. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.